well, this is a cheery gospel. Give us everything you have, and if you don't hate your mother, father, sister, or brother, you can't be my disciple. And if you're not going to carry your cross, you can't be my disciple. You go, sounds good to me. No cross, good, And I'm keeping all my stuff. See you later, Lord, The gospel it's a little harsh, a little hard to understand, but it does make sense. We'll get into that. It really has to do with what are we willing to do to follow Christ? What is it that we're willing to do in our lives to please God now? And who comes first in our life? Family members come before God, possessions come before God, our willingness to sacrifice comes before God. Remember, Jesus is talking about the king who goes into battle, and then he decides that he can't do it. He sues for terms of peace. And so when he uses these words, love, hate, whoever loves me but does not hate his mother, father, sister, or brother, those are not meant to indicate the strong emotions we associate with them. I love you, I hate you. Rather, they are treaty terms. They're declarations of who defers to who. It's been, who comes first? The one you love, and the people that you hate, it really doesn't mean you hate. They're further down the list. So it's really saying, are you willing to put me first and God's will in your life first? Now, you know that we all will be judged before the throne of God, right? We all know that. And by the way, when COVID first started and people couldn't gather inside, we had confessions outside, and it was a long line of people coming in because they didn't know what to expect, and many of them thought they were going to die. And so the confessions that we had were some of the most honest, sincere confessions we've heard. It wasn't just a weekly or monthly, spiritual devotional. It had to do with people saying, I've messed up, I haven't done what I should have done, and I don't know if I can make up for some of these things. I did have one person, though, who pulled up in the car because we were hearing car to car, and the person said, bless me, Father, for I've sinned. It's been 5,000 miles since my last confession. So you know that we will all be judged before the throne of God as to what we did that was pleasing to God in our life. But did you know the animals will be judged too? That's right, the animals will be judged too. And so there's the story of the animals were approaching the pearly gates, and the Lord God of all creation, of human beings and animals too, was sitting on his royal throne and receiving all the people and all the animals and asking them, as they come up, what did you do that would have pleased me in your life? And so the German shepherd came up, and God, sitting on his royal throne, says, what did you do that would have pleased me in your life? And the German shepherd thought a little bit and said, I protected the children. I was faithful to keep the house safe. I barked whenever anybody came near the door. And if I did not know them, I growled. God says, well done, well done. And then next comes up a water rescue dog. And God says, what did you do in your life that I would find pleasing? He says, well, I would swim out to the boats that were shipwrecked, and I would let those who were struggling grab hold of my collar. And because I'm big and strong and a water dog, I would pull them to safety. I did this many, many times until I myself drowned. And here I am. Well done, well done. And then the cat steps up, and God says, what did you? And the cat says, excuse me, I think you're in my seat. That's what happens when you don't put God first in your life, you put yourself first, I love, Father Marty Hammond told me that story. I just love that story so much. So this is a difficult gospel to try to understand because it talks about anybody who doesn't hate their mother, father, sister, or brother. And so wait a minute, what's going on here? Whatever happened to love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength, and your neighbor as yourself? That's love. What's this love-hate stuff? That's because Jesus is using an example of the king when he finds out he doesn't have the resources to go to battle, is going to submit the delegation, as I said, to sue for peace. So the love and hate are paired words in a typical treaty that declares allegiance to one over another. The idea really has more to do with who has your first loyalty, who do you defer to? And that's why Jesus is saying the same way that a king going into battle has to first decide whether or not he can do that. So we have to say, are we willing to commit the resources to following God that we need? And that has to do with, does God come first in our life? Can't put God last and then try to be able to serve him first. Part of the habit comes from the wisdom of saying, what is the most important thing right now? And that's why Jesus gets into the idea that anyone who can't renounce all their possessions cannot be his follower. The idea is what comes first, God or our stuff? Really, where is our heart's treasure? Things that are important to us, things that are important to us, or matters that are important to God. So what it really has to do is because Jesus is telling people, because he's set his face firmly towards Jerusalem, he's heading towards his cross. And that's why he's then talking about, you're going to need to get some things together if you're going to follow me where I go. And he says, you have to know what your resources are that enable you to carry your cross. And eventually it all comes down to, we have to be people who can defer to God even in our humility and in our weakness. So that when we look at Christ's life and he says, you call me Lord and Master, and rightly so. If I, O Lord and Master, am going to suffer, then you also will have to suffer. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you as well. No servant is greater than the master. And he also then says, I who am Lord and Master bow to wash your feet. So also you must wash the feet of each other. These are the things we have to get used to. As opposed to saying, when our cross comes, why the hell did you give me this? Ooh, I said hell in church. Ooh, heck. What we have to do then is realize, since the cross comes to us without our bidding it or choosing it, we have to be humble enough to accept it and then to say, Lord, I'm going to need some help with this. I don't know how you did it. And of course, we realize even Jesus had Simon to help him carry the cross. So that's when we realize that we give over everything that we have, but we still come up short. Our deference is to God first, but we've just had the readings about hospitality and humility. And so I'd like to end with this one little story. All stories are true, and some of them actually happen. But this one really happened. You might not have heard about it. It says there was a scary moment during a Little League regional tournament in Waco, Texas, which turned into an inspiring display of sportsmanship after a Little League player hit by a pitch comforted the pitcher who hit him. Peter Caden Shelton of Pearland, Texas, was facing batter Isaiah Jarvis of Tulsa, Oklahoma, when he lost control of the ball and hit Jarvis's helmet at the Little League Southwest Regional Playoff Final. It was a hard, fast pitch, and Jarvis fell to the ground and held his head as coaches rushed to check on him. Moments later, Jarvis was cleared and walked to first base. However, the pitcher, Shelton, was still so distraught and shaken up. He began to cry. This is Little League. And even though you've heard there's no crying in baseball, there's crying in baseball. So seeing the distraught pitcher, Jarvis walked toward the mound and hugged the boy. He left first base and walked over and told him, hey, you're doing great. Let's go. I'm okay. The gesture was applauded in the ballpark and online, where many held it as a true moment of sportsmanship. And I also believe both dugouts cleared to go to the mound to give a sign of affirmation to the young boy who was in tears and to also the opposing boy, the boy from the opposing team who went to support him. Jarvis told CBS News later that if he was in Shelton's shoes, the pitcher, he'd be pretty scared too. If you're throwing hard and you just hit somebody in the head, it's got to be a scary thing. So I just wanted to go over there and make sure he was all right, make sure he knows I'm all right, and really just encourage him. So if you were asking in that young boy's heart in Little League, which came first? Was it his advancing to first base? Or was it recognizing the shared humanity of his peer who was in the game and who was hurt himself? hurt emotionally, hurt deeply. There used to be a book called something like Winning Through Intimidation. Remember that? Or Looking Out for Number One. What the scriptures tell us is in order to strive to be a person who has the resources to do the things of God, we've got to try to put God first in our life as the person we defer to, as a person who has the first commitment to all our heart, all our mind, all our soul, all our strength, and then acknowledge that the same must be true for our neighbor as well. It can be difficult to follow through on that kind of commitment. But the only way we're ever going to get there, if that's the direction we're aiming in, that is what we want to be. We want to defer to God rather than to self. And this little example of selflessness I thought was so wonderful. Had this been happening in sports all the time, it would have never made the pages. It would have just been another example of good sportsmanship. But as it is, it was something that stood out because so many people are at each other's throats today. It was a very welcome reminder of, hey, it's not whether you win or lose. It's how you play the game.